Okay, this is a hot button topic because I find there to be two distinct camera camps between the alpha line of cameras with my favorite compact one, the Sony A7C, and the vlogging generation of cameras, and the most beefed up one at that, the ZV-E1. But they are way more similar, and not just in body size than you think, and yet still very different. But if you had to choose one and both were in your budget, which one would it be? Well, let me compare them for you now and see if I can help you clarify the answer. Because for me, I can't keep both, so I have to make that decision too. Also, what about the ZV-E1 versus a future release like the A7C Mark II? Well, that may be a much harder choice as they will likely come in at about the same price point. So which one would you pick then? So I've had my A7C for about 2 years now, and I've traveled the world with it. And I've had my ZV-E1 for only about 2 months, but I've been using it a lot lately, more than I thought I would, because, well, for a few reasons that I will list below. But first, let's skip some of the spec comparisons for now and just show you some goods, show you some footage between the two. Okay, so this is a Sony A7C and this is a Sony ZV-E1. I have two Rokinon lenses, two f2.8s. This is the 18mm with dynamic stabilization on, which means it's got a 30% crop. So roughly it should be about the same as this 24mm f2.8. You're gonna see there's a little bit difference in framing and field of view. I tried to match them as best I could. I just got active stabilization on the Sony A7C, and again dynamic on the ZV-E1. I've tried to match the colors and exposure the best I could. I have a variable ND on both of them, and I think I'm about 2 stops. I've got S Cinetone in the ZV-E1, and I've got a custom picture profile like C Cinetone in the A7C. So I'm just trying to match exposure, white balance, and it's an overcast day, and I'm also using the in-body mic in the ZV-E1 and the in-body mic in the A7C. So you can not only see the difference, you can hear the difference. So which one sounds better and which one looks better to you? So again, dynamic stabilization on the Sony ZV-E1 and active stabilization on the A7C. Now, this has been me dialed into both of these cameras in manual mode with a custom picture profile with A7C or with S Cinetone and graded in the ZV-E1. Yet, I think it's worth noting, as somebody in my comments section brilliantly suggested, that I should test out the auto modes in each of these cameras because how I use these cameras may not be how the average user does. So here, I'm gonna slap both of these in full auto. So now I'm gonna try completely in auto. This is a Sony A7C, and this is a Sony ZV-E1. I'm gonna go from inside to outside to see how it adjusts exposure. So if you didn't notice, of course, they're doing construction next door. So as I go outside, you're gonna be hearing some nail guns because they're laying roof. Of course they are. So here we go. Going from inside to outside, completely in auto. Everything in auto, including the mic. That's probably what you're hearing. So auto white balance, the picture profile is off, and yes, the Sony A7C over here and the Sony ZV-E1 over here. Luckily, again, it's overcast, so that is helpful in some instances, but let's see what it does. Let's see if you can see if either of them are overexposed or underexposed, if it's balancing that out well. Again, these are both Rokinon f2.8 lenses. I've got both 2 stops of ND on. It does look like the ZV-E1 is managing to not clip any of these highlights. Again, we're talking 8-bit versus 10-bit. So yeah, what do you think? Which one do you like better? Which one's doing better in auto? Okay, I'm gonna take this back inside and see what it does. Shutting the door, I have no lights on. Yeah, so which one looks better? All right, next test. So I think some may be too quick to jump to the conclusion that if you do mostly video, pick the ZV-E1. And if you do more photo, just pick the A7C. But I don't think it's that clear cut because the A7C has some advantages with video and the ZV-E1 is no slouch when it comes to photo. So here I did a quick walk with both cameras with a combination of different lenses to compare photos to prove that the ZV-E1 can in fact be a great camera for snapping pics, since we saw that the A7C is also a beast with video. So here, let me show you. So now let's actually compare the specs and give some points out to the camera that may win in each category in my opinion. So the first and the most obvious is price. The A7C is currently on sale for $1598 for the body only, and the ZV-E1 is $2198, again for body only. And yet, for whatever reason, I've been using the kit lens more on the ZV-E1 than the A7C. This 28-60 has been in my camera bag now for every trip I've gone with the ZV-E1, but it never came with me in my A7C. But more on the kit lens in another video. Regardless, the price is a clear win for the A7C. This is a fantastic value with or without the lens. So the next biggest advantage for the A7C is the 24.2 megapixels versus the 12.1 of the ZV-E1. So it's a clear win for the A7C, not just in photo, but in video in regards to resolution. Everything is sharper. You have a downsampled 6K, so in crop mode, you are still getting a 4K image. And for photos in full frame, for me, 24 megapixels is at minimum of what you'd want if you're trying to earn a living with your camera as a photographer. But the ZV-E1 still takes great pics. I just wouldn't feel comfortable taking headshots with them professionally, but for real estate, it may be fine. But the A7C as a true hybrid can do both, so point there. Next, maybe the most important spec for me, and this is why I actually bought the ZV-E1, it's color depth. The ZV-E1 has 10-bit color and the A7C has 8-bit color. But you may say, oh, that's a nominal difference of only 2 bits, right? But in actuality, with bit depth or pixel depth, we're talking about the amount of color information that a sensor can receive per red, green, or blue channel. So an 8-bit camera can collect a total of roughly 16 million colors. So like a lot, right? But with 10-bit, you are getting over 1 billion possible colors. So you will not see as much banding, artifacting, or colors falling apart with 10-bit. But more so, you have way more flexibility to color grade in post, and you get not just a better image and recover more highlights or lift more shadows, but to me, this is the difference between a pro-level video camera and an amateur one. Not saying you can't make the A7C look phenomenal with care, but the ZV-E1, it's effortless in good lighting or not. So you get better video, but because of this, you also get better picture profiles. So the ZV-E1 gets its first point. Now for picture profiles, and of course in these 10-bit cameras, you get S-Cinetone, which is the best pickup and shoot profile for the ZV-E1, and I'm shooting on it now on the FX3. So it's as good as is, or you can grade it. But with the A7C, I made my own custom C-Cinetone profile. I have a link in the description of how I created it, but it's hit or miss. Or you can shoot an H-Log3, which is okay. It's what I shot 90% of all my videos in the past with, but for many complicated reasons that I will not get into, it's not easy to work with across different cameras while managing different color spaces. But you do get that slight increase in dynamic range, whereas with the ZV-E1, you also get S-Log3, which is the best picture profile in all Sony cameras, and it's what makes this sensor a pro-level sensor. They just filmed a big budget sci-fi film with the FX3, the same sensor, because of the dynamic range, especially with low light performance of this picture profile. So here, let me show you a quick low light comparison. Okay, so here is a pretty unfair night test. This is the A7C in H-Log3. I'm at ISO 6400, and this is the ZV-E1 in S-Log3 at 4000 ISO. And as you can tell, I'm pushed beyond each of their dual natives. There is no real dual native in H-Log3. It does seem to clean up around 5,000, where this cleans up at 12,800, but I am pushing that quite a bit at 40,000, I should say. So as you can see, the ZV-E1 is killing it. So the H-Log3 is great. It does increase dynamic range in 8-bit cameras, but the S-Log3 will always be king. So this is probably why you might want to take this camera before the A7C, in case you ever want to shoot at night when you're traveling, or just in general usage. That dynamic range is amazing. So I love the flexible ISO mode. I've made a whole video on it. Check it out if you want to. But yeah, so what do you think? Nighttime. So on the ZV-E1, I was shooting in flexible ISO mode, but way above the recommended second native ISO of 12,800. I also did a whole video for this, link below, but you can shoot in the super flat log profile, S-Log3, for increased dynamic range in day or night, but monitor in camera with a custom LUT. Whereas on my A7C, I have to rig up the camera, put a monitor on it to view H-Log3 with a LUT on. So the fact that you can do this all within the ZV-E1, well, is clearly a win. And I'm not sure how many points to give here, but let's just say one more for low light performance and custom display LUT. So we are tied 2-2. Next, it's EVF. Simple point goes to the A7C. I will repeat in every video if I have to. If given the option for an EVF or not, I will choose an EVF. I don't care if people hate the one on the A7C. It isn't that bad, and it's way better than not having one. Point A7C. Next is maybe the second reason I bought the ZV-E1, and even though I already have the A7C, which I did buy as my main travel camera because of its size, where I can put it in my camera sling or pretty much in my pocket, so no matter where I go, I have a full frame camera with me, and it's been fantastic. However, every time I upload a travel video, the most common complaint I get is with the stability, and I agree, so much so that I made a whole video on using Catalyst Browse to clean up shaky footage, and I prayed that one day they'd be able to use this algorithmic stability in camera, and lo and behold, we got dynamic active stabilization. It's crazy how good it is. I will not rant further about it, as I already have a video where I tested a bunch of lenses with this mode, because the added benefit of a dynamic stabilization is its 30% crop, where you can use APS-C lenses with this camera, and that crop pretty much clears the vignetting. So I've been loving using Sigma's 16mm f1.4 as it's super cheap, wide, and fast. So the stabilization point goes clearly to the ZV-E1. But the A7C does have crop mode, so you can also put an APS-C lens on it, like the 16 on this camera, and it automatically knows to crop 1.5 times, and you're good to go. And again, still in 4K. Now you can even on a full frame lens go into crop mode and then basically have two focal lengths. So with one lens, for example, I can use my 85 and then press crop, which I've set to a custom button, and you get almost 130mm. So easy point for the A7C. Well, not so fast. The ZV-E1 has clear image zoom. So in fact, with the zoom rocker, you can actually zoom in with not just an APS-C lens, but also a prime lens. 1.5 times, and with the ZV-E1, you don't lose any autofocus features as you do with almost all Sonys and the A7C. So when you're cropped in all the way, you still get eye autofocus. So there's better resolution with A7C's crop mode, but better autofocus features and a variable crop with the ZV-E1. So this category may be a tie. Okay, I'm just gonna do a lightning round here and give some points out much faster. So here, ease of use goes to the ZV-E1, but the A7C has more buttons and dials, so point. The A7C has a mechanical shutter, point, because the ZV-E1 only has electronic shutter. Now frame rates, that goes to the ZV-E1, as we currently have 4K 60 uncropped and possibly 4K 120 in the very near future, whereas the A7C tops out at 4K 30, point. But for versatility, the A7C gets its point, not just because it's a hybrid camera, but because for me, it's a better camera to rig up as a studio camera, as it is reliably going to shoot without the fear of overheating. Yeah, as a small camera, I'm going to give point to the ZV-E1 for ergonomics. For whatever reason, the slightly different shape and texture of the grip is better to hold, point. So now this may be where the ZV-E1 gets the rest of the points, because it also has somehow better autofocus, touchscreen, breathing compensation, better as a webcam, product showcase mode, it's lighter, it has tally lamps, auto framing, an amazing internal 3-capsule mic, and honestly more features than I have time to mention here. So does that mean that the ZV-E1 is the clear winner? Well, again, I don't think it's that simple, and I don't think these points are weighted the same for everybody, since price might be the most important factor for some, or stabilization for others. We all have different needs with our cameras, or for life really. However, what may be the most interesting comparison will be the ZV-E1 versus the A7C Mark II. Now many will say that even speculating on the A7C Mark II to even compare it to the ZV-E1 is a waste of time, because it hasn't even been announced yet. But I think it's almost certain what the specs will be if history repeats itself. So here, check this out and you tell me what you think the better camera will be, because I honestly don't know, but I will probably pre-order the A7C Mark II as soon as it's possible. All right, thanks guys.